Hello, this is Dr. Llewellyn Eisen, and once again I'm hidden from view because, I've discovered that if I'm sitting here at home making these lectures, I have less of an incentive to get myself all fancy and dressed up. But I do promise at some point you'll see me. But if, you need to see a picture of me, then just go back to the Begin Here page and you can see a rather sickly looking picture of me there. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the development of Christian philanthropy. And this is something that doesn't come to Christianity by accident. Of course, Christianity's understanding of philanthropy or the love of a fellow human is going to be something it is going to inherit from both the healthcare practices of the classical world, but also it's going to inherit its approach to philanthropy from both the schools of philosophy, but also from Jewish theology. And as Christianity develops its own theology and understanding of its relationship to God and the person of Jesus, philanthropic approaches to people are going to emerge. Once Christianity understands itself as a religion distinct from Judaism, it's going to have to very quickly establish a few boundaries and really some ground rules. Within the first few generations of Christian communities, once they are distinct from Jewish communities, a hierarchy is going to develop. And for the most part, in very general terms, there's going to be a threefold degree of leadership. At the very top is the bishop, and the bishop is understood as the guardian, not just of the community, but of what the community believes. So understanding the theology of Christianity is going to be central, and actually being able to articulate that theology is going to be central to the role of the bishop. As well, the bishop is not just theologically astute, but they are also administratively astute. They are an administrator. They are a guard of the organization. At the second level, under the bishop, is the presbyter, and the presbyter is a position which will in time be known as the priest. And the primary responsibility of the priest is to distribute the sacraments or the particular rituals that are important in early Christian communities. The primary rituals that the priest is responsible for distributing, or sacraments that the priest is responsible for distributing, were the ritual of baptism, the sacrament of baptism, but also the sacrament of the Eucharist, a word for thanksgiving, a sacrament which in the Latin world and in the North American world is often referred to as communion. And then a third level of the hierarchy of early Christian communities is that of the deacon and the deaconess. And these are servants of the communities, servants of the priest, who in turn is a servant of the bishop. And the task of the deacon and the deaconess was very often basic physical care for people in the communities, and not just Christians, but basically physical care for whoever needed it. The deacons and the deaconesses would assist in the distribution of the sacraments. They would also assist not just in the Eucharist, but also, so the distribution of bread and wine, but also they would assist in the sacrament of baptism, so the washing of people. They would assist in the distribution of alms or food or money that were necessary for people in need. Another element of organization that is going to need to be established within a few generations of the emergence of Christianity are things like statements about what it is that Christians believe. And these are referred to as rules of faith or creeds. And it makes sense when you think about it, because usually one of the first things a group of people will do when they get together is they will determine what it is that their motto might be, or their mission statement, if you will. It's wrong to think that early Christians will create one particular rule of faith or creed that will be representative of all of them. In fact, the creeds that emerge, the Nicene Creed, the Constantinople Creed, and eventually the Apostles' Creed centuries later, are going to be formed out of creeds that are held to be valuable and meaningful by many different regional groups of Christians. And then a third organizing principle that proto-Orthodox or early Christian communities will establish is an authoritative set of books. Now, in the case of Christianity, there will be in time a set of books that is known as the New Testament. Now, it's not going to be known as the New Testament for many centuries, but the books that are included in the New Testament are largely composed within about a 70-year, and that's maximum 70-year period of time. And that's going to include a set of texts known as Gospels, from Evangelion or Good News. It will include a set of letters. It will include an additional writing known as the Acts, which was originally part of one of the Gospels, the Gospel of Luke. And then it will also include a specific type of writing known as an apocalypse, which is kind of a mysterious type of writing, which is usually only understood by the people for whom it was originally intended, which means for the rest of us it makes very little sense, which also means we can do with it, lots of fun things. Now, the books that are in time going to be known as the New Testament canon are going to have a couple of things in common, because there were several versions of different gospel accounts, but the four that are going to in time be chosen as considerably authoritative are going to have a couple things in common. One, they're going to be dated closely to the time of the person of Jesus, and so in that case they're considered basically ancient. Even though they aren't technically ancient texts, nevertheless they are dated close to the time when Jesus was alive. A second category is that they're going to be considered apostolic, meaning composed by individuals who were of that first generation of the followers of Jesus. Now, were they actually composed by people named Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? Probably not. And not even really important. The point is not that they were actually composed by people who were apostles, but they were composed by, or they were attributed to people who were called apostles. Another quality is that the authoritative set of books, known as the Gospels and the New Testament, are considered Catholic. And by Catholic, I mean universal. And by universal, I mean they were largely regarded as books that were valued by most communities, most early Christian communities, but they didn't have to be valued by all of the early Christian communities. For example, one group in Syria might value the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of Luke and Matthew, but it might not value the Gospel of John. Another community in Rome might value Mark and Luke and John, but not Matthew. So you can see that there's crossover in those books, even though they don't necessarily value all of them or use all of them. So all four of those could be considered Catholic. And then finally, Orthodox. And Orthodox is a word that means right belief. And so for the most part, the authoritative books that are considered the Gospels are considered Orthodox, meaning they largely reflect what Christians at that point consider to be right. And it doesn't mean that all four of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are either in perfect agreement with each other or that they fill in bits of the story that other Gospels leave off. But by Orthodox, generally what is meant is that the gospel accounts aren't in conflict with one another in ways that are problematic. So there are ways in which the gospel accounts are in conflict, but they're not, according to those who considered these texts to be authoritative. They're not in conflict with each other in ways that are problematic. Now, the gospel accounts and the early letters that become part of the New Testament canon are not the only books that Christians value, either in the early Christian centuries or today. Rather, the canon, if you want to think of it as the center of the written or literary tradition of Christianity, is only seen as one part of a broad literary tradition. Christianity values what's considered the canonical text, but it also values hagiography, which is a fancy word that means holy stories. Christianity also values a type of text called a sermon, which is a usually edifying lesson that is delivered to a group of people who have come together. And actually, for this lesson, we're going to be reading Gregory of Nyssa's sermon. But then there's also part of the literary tradition that includes things like canon law, and these are legal texts that are put together to support certain kinds of ethical or moral ways of living. There are also creeds, so again, mission statements and rules of faith that are easily memorized statements about belief that help an individual articulate to someone what it is they believe. And then there's also extra canonical texts, so additional gospels, additional acts, additional stories that don't make it into the canon, but that are in many ways retained as part of the tradition because, well, in some cases they're fun. In some cases they're really great stories. And so why would you discard them if they're not, considered problematic? So again, in the early centuries in the development of Christianity, there's the cultivation of an organization, there's a cultivation of leadership, there's a cultivation of rules and creeds about who Christians are and what matters to them. And then there's a cultivation of a literary tradition, a broad tradition that assists Christians throughout the centuries in establishing and maintaining meaning in their lives. Now, some historical events that shape early Christian approaches to health care are going to include the following. Of course, you're going to have the death of Jesus and the death of the subsequent first generation and later followers of Jesus. These are, of course, going to be historical events that shape Christian approaches to healthcare because they involve pain and suffering, and sometimes unnecessary suffering, as well as dealing with bodily suffering. Other historical events that shape Christian approaches to healthcare include the transformation of certain concepts like resurrection. And we talked a little bit about this in the last lesson. The fact that Christianity is going to present a different way of thinking about life after death. And so consequently, the transformation of the concept of death is something that is going to take place within the religious world at that time. What does it mean to be separated from someone because of death? And does death have to be the end of the relationship? And so the fact that Christians as a religious group remain in relationship with their God figure of Jesus after Jesus' death is going to force people to rethink the idea of resurrection. And as well, it's going to transform the way one thinks of the concept of kin, because kin is very important in the classical world and in late antiquity.